I'm not basically a writer of fiction. I have been writing poetry, and now I want to introduce a book that I plan to write. But before that, I'll discuss a statement. I just sometimes generate generalized statements, and I find some very good answers to that. The subject of this statement is basically uh, that I had been writing in the last 15 years of my written work, uh, my over of 11 or 12 books, translations, and English basically. We had been discussing that the role of global lingua franca. We also need that. We just simply can't be talking in our own language, which only we understand. Nobody else in the world understands. We are not even bothered about that. We have to have a narrative as well, since we are, uh, in a way, inheritors of a great history, thousands of years. Civilizations have uh, been thriving here. They have left their mark in this place. Not only civilizations of brute force, but civilizations that had an intellectual input, still remembered the world over. We talk of ancient Indus Valley civilization, or if we are talking of Gandhara, or if we are talking of others, and in the form of invasions and not invasions as such. So basically, that had been movement from place to place, and then making empires in that new place. So that's how history had been evolving. So the statement that I have and I would like to share with you is that the initial act of literary creation often begins with a specific geographic and cultural dedication. The title is The Horizon of Localized Devotion. The horizon of localized devotion. This means that some people say that you should be devoted to your your locality, your language. This begins with that premise. So, thesis. Initial act of literary creation often begins with a specific geographic or cultural dedication. To offer a body of creative work to distinct regional tapestries such as the heritage of Pashtuns, Sindhis, or Gilgiti peoples, or the administrative confluence of Islamabad, is an act of profound cultural stewardship. It is an effort to give texture, language, and form to the realities of a particular site. So the point was that I had been dedicating my books to the people of Gilgit. I had been writing there. I had been dedicating my book to, I have dedicated that book, a bilingual edition, to Sindh, to the people of Sindh, and then to Pashtuns, and then I had been writing in Islamabad. Wherever I have served, I have been to that place. I have engaged myself in some sort of intellectual or creative activity. And I have developed sort of emotive connection with the heritage, with the history, with the culture, or with whatever peculiar was about that culture. So when it was about Gilgit Baltistan, so it's that beauty, that nature, that spiritual elation that we feel over there. When we are talking of sin, so it's historical, a lot of history, that uh, alluvial plains. When we are talking of Pashtuns, so Pashto is my own native language, and they had always been saying that I am not contributing anything towards Pashto. While in my case, uh, this again is very unfortunate that I can't read or write Pashto. I can read somewhat. I may be able to write. I think in Pashto. And then Pashto has its own variants like Waziri Pashto, Pashto of the South, Pashto of the North, the literary Pashto. So it is about that thing that I had been uh, dedicating my books to those particular styles. Yet, as the creative work moves outward into the world, an essential paradox of literature emerges. That's the point here. That what's that paradox then that emerges that we are faced with uh, these days? The immediate validation of this work often arises from an unexpected quarter, the Urdu speaking literary community. Now, the second part of the statement was that my work, specifically my work, had been appreciated by Urdu speaking people. Now, I'm not talking of ethnicities, but when we are talking of Urdu speaking people, we assume that they were more literate 100 years ago. They had a cosmopolitan of that time concept of expressing themselves, and they had evolved a peculiar culture. So, when we are talking of Urdu speaking people, by that we mean that they inherited that 400, 500, or 600 years of heritage in the form of their language and in the form of their mannerisms. And how those people came into being, what Urdu is called. Urdu is a Turkic word, and that means army or military. The military had a lot many people together, mostly Persian speaking, Turkic speaking, some local. And then they evolved this language. And I still say that it is among all the languages in the region, it still is a refined language. This community, possessing a deep historical affinity for dense prose and classical poetic structures, reads the text not out of regional sentimentality. Regional sentimentality. This is another word that how we are trapped in regional sentimentality. I belong to this place. I belong to that place. So I have to stick to that language, and then I have to develop that language. Well, you do that, you develop that language, but you are also living in a global world. You also have to have a narrative of your own to be heard somewhere, to let the people know about you. Uh, but from an aesthetic and intellectual appreciation of the craft itself. This cross cultural embrace brings immediate relief. It frees the writer from the suffocating expectations to serve as an ethnic delegate or a defensive representative of an isolated group. It shifts the validation of the work away from the accidents of geography and birth, centering it instead on shared intellectual substance. So that's the benefit of it. Total autonomy and cosmopolitan freedom. When the author accepts the transience of external support and embraces this essential isolation, they achieve total freedom. Have to rise above that regionalism. The relief described here is the freedom from needing permission to speak. The writer is no longer bound by an obligation to validate a specific group's narrative or conform to a particular linguistic community's aesthetic boundaries. Here we enchain the intellect, or we enter into some sort of herd instinct, a victim instinct, I will say, that particular community, instead of transcending themselves in thought and in the process, they are bound together and they start thinking that they are being victimized by some other group, the dominant group in their perception. And in most of the cases, the fact is that it is not any fault of the dominant group. I had just been reading that the Native Americans had been enfranchised in 18 in 1924, not 1824, 1924. That's very recent. And when I looked at the reasons behind that, apparently it seemed that Americans, the ethnic Americans or the dominant Americans or the federal government or the state, they were responsible. They may have a responsibility, but actually the tribes themselves were not agreeing to it. They were thinking that they would be losing their sovereignty. And this sort of struggle is going on various areas in the most marginalized society. If you want to penetrate a society, if you want to develop a society, you face quite a resistance because that society is in a collective comfort zone. They don't want to improve, they don't want to grow. And those who are representing that society, they reinforce that feeling. They just become leaders of that. I had just heard some politician saying that those who are living in the far districts of Sindh in Thar, they don't need AI. Why they don't need AI? If AI reaches there, they will be much more aware of that. So it is multiple, uh, I will say, fanged in a way that they neither grow themselves, they don't allow others to, and those who are in power, those who are elites, those who are representing them, they are telling them to be like that because it gives them the leverage. So a Pashtun, if he is not a backward Pashtun, if he is not living in the hill, if he is not involved in that kind of a trade, which still they don't understand, then who will be doing politics? If we are talking of any other community, so if they are not like that, if they don't say that the very structure or existence of the polity is threatened just because that someone will be out of it and can get back to the people, and the people are kept that way in complete total dark. That's a discussion in developments. Anyways, I was talking about the language. By stripping away these layers, the author's work ceases to be an artifact of regional friction and becomes part of a broader global conversation. The specific realities of the regions that inspired the work remain intact, preserving like precise specimens within the text. However, the meaning of the text is untethered. It travels to any mind anywhere in the world. It's about that global language which we are talking about. That is capable of feeling its resonance. It can go anywhere. And while you are writing somewhere in your local languages, in today's world when millions of books are published across the globe, then you come up with some low quality fiction or some sort of a poetry that has a history of 300 years with you, and it is not talking of the core issues of politics, of economics, of poverty, of violence, of peace, of ecology, gender, equality. What that literature is, just it's nothing. It has got no value at all. Literature is not storytelling as we generally conceive it. That some people sitting somewhere will be listening to some stories somewhere in some cafe, and some silk route stories of a caravan of camels and some demons and some fairies. They would be listening that. That may be some consolation for the society, but that's not literature in these days. The literature is about the resources, where the taxpayers' money is going. What are the rights of the individual? How literature is addressing that? How literature is addressing certain phenomena. A very recent example of some rogue boy entering into a hospital and throwing acid on the face of a lady doctor. What's that? Is that tradition? Is that Pashtunwali? Is that written in any code of humanity? Or, for that matter, if we are going to some other rigid structures who are exploiting people, that is, in my view, literature. And if you see global literature, many countries, many regions, they have grown from that basic level of their literature, advanced level of their literature, creating a global narrative. We talk of Turkey, we talk of Africa, we talk of Nigeria, we talk of Caribbean, even if we are talking of Arab world, they have had their Nobel laureates, they have a view. And one good or successful author can make a difference. Gabriel Garcia Marquez would be negotiating with state heads, Fidel Castro and others. So they represent sentiment, not that very basic domestic level of sentiment, but the broader sentiment that is valued. That's the role of a civilized society. If the society is not civilized, so if that is not heard, if the author is not given an audience at all, and if his awards are going somewhere here and there, if he is not even or she is not even known, but my point is all writers keep on writing. You are adding. You may not be acknowledged today. You have something in your heart. You have something in your mind. And you can use some of those means that the technology is providing you. If it is not a classroom, if it is not a big gathering, you can just talk somewhere. And if there are 10 people who are listening to what you are saying, that might be a change. Or if you are going for some sort of a minor event, that event would remain in the memory, might be a source of change for someone. Uh, However, the meaning of the text is untethered. It travels to any mind, anywhere in the world that is capable of feeling its resonance. The transient support of contemporaries serves its purpose as a catalyst, but the final destination is a state of quite monumental independence. That's the stage that, in my view, I would like to achieve. State of quietness. It doesn't matter that you are heard or not, or if you have something to say and someone is not paying a heed to it. That's not necessary at all. People are independent. Where the author stands alone, that is my feeling. Author is alone. I don't need any validation that I have dedicated a book to this community, to that community. I have written in this language or that language, whether they are appreciating it or not, or whether my language is good or bad, whether it is pure or not. I write in post-colonial English language with its nuances, and if that is conveying a thought, and if it is not conveying any thought at all, if it is a printed word somewhere, and then maybe somebody picks it and reads from it. And if not, at least at the moment I am spending some good time with it, writing it. Where the author stands alone holding a light belonging to nothing else than entire human experience. Entire human experience. Tagore understood that deepest creative realization occur only when the artist sheds the protective garment of group identity. We are talking of Rabindranath Tagore, Nobel laureate, and one of my very favorite writers. In his collection Gitanjali, he actively sought a space where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Narrow domestic walls. For Tagore, true freedom meant breaking away from the bondage of the soil, not out of disregard for the land, but because emancipation from the bondage of the soil is no freedom for the tree. Emancipation from the bondage of the soil is no freedom for the tree. It prevents the branches from reaching into global sky. This is what he means by emancipation. He gives the example of the tree. If the tree is in the soil, so then its branches reach to the sky. A striking parallel can be found in the insights of the Lebanese American poet Khalil Gibran, who similarly navigated the tensions of writing from specific cultural background while speaking to a global audience. Gibran observed that the profoundest human experiences can only be captured when the creator detaches from the immediate crowd. This is very important. Writers are generally tempted by the crowd. They just want that they are representing that crowd, that validation from the crowd. He noted that solitude is a silent storm that breaks down all our dead branches, quote, stripping away the superficial identities imposed by society until only the core of universal humanity remains. Like Tagore, Gibran viewed the poet as an enormous wanderer whose true home is the human heart, unlimited by national or linguistic frontiers. This perspective is further monitored by the German poet Rainer Maria Rilke in his Letters to a Young Poet, where he asserts that there is only one solitude and it is large and not easy to bear, quote unquote. There is only one solitude and it is large and not easy to bear. One solitude, it is large, it is not easy to bear. Rilke maintained that an artist must be like an island digging deep into their own internal well springs to discover truths that are valid for all people in all eras. Stage of authorship, psychological state, cultural scope, ultimate destination, regional dedication. The psychological state is empathic duty, cultural scope, local, fragmented. Ultimate destination, the cultural soil. Can you see the limitations here for regional dedication? Then there is cross-cultural reception. Stage of authorship is cross-cultural reception. Psychological state, intellectual relief. Cultural scope, inter-regional. Ultimate destination, the literary saloon. Some of us are at this stage, some one odd writers. They are in their saloons. You don't see them anywhere. I'll see and I'll talk about the academia. When you see their role, I don't want to be very explicit about that, but that would disappoint you, especially when they are talking of literature, of their literature festivals and the audience that they are addressing, of the thinking they are promoting. Some of them have uh, their own views, strange views. I don't see any critical appreciation of literature or mind. And since we are talking of the academia, if we go through the papers, the examination of the central superior services of the country, they are completely asking for extensive critical understanding. Why the result is just 2.5% or 2.6%. They cannot qualify. They are coming from the same academia. They cannot qualify. They are not trained. They do not have those faculties at all. And the country can't be handed over to those who are um, who are not competent, who are not intellectually competent. The resources later or the management. Uh, Existential isolation, absolute autonomy. I favor this. There should be absolute autonomy. Even I would not like to be in the classroom. If the classroom is coming with divergent views, I do accept a view different than mine, but the distractions, lack of interest, that's very common. And uh, cultural scope is cosmopolitan. Ultimate destination, universal humanity. This should be the aim of our writing. Total autonomy and cosmopolitan freedom. When the author accepts the transience of external support and embraces this essential isolation, they achieve total freedom. Total freedom. Total freedom had been basically my concept, my very first book. Concept is basically derived from Rumi. Rumi's total freedom. And we are unfortunate that we lack any connection, that source of energy that would make you free to think, to explore, to be critical, to be inspired, and to be proud of your own cultural values. The relief described here is the freedom from needing permission to speak. The relief described here is the freedom from needing permission to speak. The writer is no longer bound by an obligation to validate a specific group's narrative or conform to a particular linguistic community's aesthetic boundaries. That's the stage where we have to be. By stripping away these layers, the author uh, work ceases to be an artifact of regional friction and becomes part of broader global conversation. The specific realities of the regions that inspired the work remain intact, preserved like precise specimens within the text. However, the meaning of the text is untethered. It travels to any mind, anywhere in the world that is capable of feeling its resonance. The transient support of contemporaries serves its purpose as a catalyst, but the final destination is a state of quiet, monumental independence. I like this expression, where the author stands alone, holding a light belonging to nothing less than the entire human experience. The lone figure and the universal matrix. At the end of this literary evolution, the author stands completely detached from localized identity. The writer emerges as a solitary figure who belongs to no specific enclave but to humanity at large. This transition from regional focus to universal alienation is not a tragedy, it is the ultimate realization of artistic freedom. The word is used as universal alienation to basically relate others, that there is a universal alienation. It's just across the globe. It's universal. The ethos finds its most articulate parallels in the philosophical and poetic works of Rabindranath Tagore. Throughout his life, Tagore fought fiercely against the claustrophobia of narrow nationalism and regionalism, advocating instead for the borderless domain of cosmopolitan human thought. In his celebrated anthem of solitary resolve, Ekla Chalore, Ekla Chalore, walk alone. That's the missionary. Uh, Tagore was a missionary writer. He was rooted in the soil, but he was cosmopolitan. Tagore frames the ultimate destiny of the truth seeker and the artist as a path of absolute isolation. It's a couplet by Tagore. If they answer not to your call, walk alone. If they turn away and desert you when crossing the wilderness, with a thunder flame of pain ignite your own heart, let it burn. This is inspiration, couplet by Tagore. Transits of group support. However, a deeper existential realization avails the author while the warm reception from a specific group provides a vital harbor. The communal solace is inherently transient. Group alignments, linguistic fellowships, and the praise of contemporary circles are bound by time and shifting social tides. The collective I is fickle. Its attention changes focus with the political and cultural seasons. This is what we observe that the culture, the, the groups, those who consider themselves as marginalized, their attention changes focus with the political and cultural seasons. For the author, depending too heavily on the patronage and emotional support of any singular collective, even one as sophisticated as Urdu speaking intelligentsia. So here it comes even to that point, that sub statement that we had been saying, that while we are talking of this region, Urdu speaking people are comparatively more receptive to literature. And here this report says that even one as sophisticated as the Urdu speaking intelligentsia presents a subtle risk. It threatens to replace old regional domestic walls with new, broader yet equally confining borders. This is a cogent critique. The collective embrace remains a temporary resting place on a much longer trajectory. Ultimately, the applause fades, the contemporary salons disperse. Ultimately, the applause fades, the contemporary salons disperse, and the author is focused to confront a stark, liberating truth. The creative act is fundamentally a solitary conceptual path of authorship. Regional impulse, dedication to soil and cultural heritage, transient harbor, cross cultural linguistic praise and relief, solitary ascent, the isolated poet walk alone philosophy, universal matrix, integration into cosmopolitan human thought. I have a matrix here of this whole phenomena. I'll be showing that to you. This matrix defines the solitary ascent beyond transience towards universal author. Here it is. I've also shared it in the horizon of local devotion. There is, specifically, if we are talking of Pashtun heritage, Sindhi heritage, Gilgiti heritage, cultural heritage, Islamabad confluence, localized devotions, cultural stewardship, its specific cultural soil, the lone figure. Here we see the Gitanjali of Rabindranath Tagore and solitude, Rainer Maria Rilke's thought, one solitude, large and not easy. Then there is global ascent. Collective I is fickle, fading applause, temporary resting place. It's an evolution. This evolution is through, through, I would say, through ages, through generations. It's not one man's story of this growth of literature or coming into an independent civilization. This report, though it's quite extensive, but it's not including the role of the institutions. That can be a separate research. And total autonomy and cosmopolitan freedom goes to global conversation, meaning untethered, quite, quite monumental independence, holding a light belonging to entire human experience, cosmopolitan freedom. This has been our discussion for today. Thank you for being with me, uh, bearing my this whole discussion, and I hope that we have learned something out of this. Thank you very much.